This is the Listening Books Podcast. For every kind of reader, and especially for fans of audiobooks. I'm Jessica Stone, and this is the last episode of this year's series. As such, we're doing something we haven't done in a while, and that's play one of my devious little literary games. Here to play are Listening Book staff members Amy Flinders and Edward Herring, but before we get to that, I've asked them to help me with a roundup of books that have brought us joy this year. Edward, why don't you start us off? What books have brought you joy lately?
Thank you. Yeah. So the first thing I brought with me today is Under Milk Wood by Dylan Thomas, which isn't a book. It's a radio play that was written in the 40s, I think. Dylan Thomas was a Welsh poet, and this play is set in a small Welsh fishing town, and it kind of begins at night and it enters like everyone's dreams, and it sort of moves into like everyone's thoughts as they go throughout the day. And so it brings me joy, I guess, because obviously Dylan Thomas is a poet, and he wrote this like really beautiful, lyrical, kind of crazy poetry that I also really love. But this is like a play about like very parochial, humdrum, kind of bumbling figures that I feel like anyone who's grown up in a small town will sort of recognize even now. And it just invests the world, the very like humdrum world, with sort of poetry, basically. So even the kind of drabbest thing, the most sort of the smallest, most trivial domestic object or whatever is just invested with all this like really beautiful poetry. And so I guess that gives me a lot of joy. It's also really funny. It's like a really funny play. All the characters in it are very funny. And I don't know if all the characters, it's like a lot of, kind of like local Welsh figures. And so, I mean, I grew up in the North. So, whenever I hear kind of like Northern accents or Yorkshire accents and stuff, it always kind of like makes me feel a bit nostalgic. But there's like a special humour that I think you get from like local areas. And I feel like Dylan Thomas is definitely picking up from his sort of Welsh childhood. And it's got really like quotable bits in it. I've actually, can I read some out? I've brought some.
Oh, please do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's one character who's, I think he's like a draper or he does something with cloth. I can't remember now, but he's dreaming about another woman in the town that he really desires, loves, basically. And he says, throw away your little bed socks and Welsh wool knitted jacket. I will warm the sheets like an electric toaster. I will lie by your side like the Sunday roast, which I think is a sort of invitation to love is very appealing. I mean, I'd say yes. So,
I will lie by your side.
Like the Sunday roast, yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
Exactly. So it's just kind of like, it just uses all the objects and stuff from The next book I brought with me it's quite similar in some ways. It's Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout. So Elizabeth Strout, she's an American writer, and this book is
her.
also
big fan.
Yeah. Oh, she's the best. She's amazing. So this book, it's set in a small town in Maine in USA, which, if people don't know, is like sort of on the East Coast. It's almost like very close to Canada, I think, kind of north of New York. So quite cold and windy and quite kind of austere landscape. But basically, it's this small, again, I think it's like a kind of old fishing town where the main character...
Sensing
Olive
a theme
Kitteridge,
there, Edward.
I know, yeah, exactly. Well, I grew up very inland, so goodness knows why I'm choosing all these books about, coastal places. But yeah, anyway, so Olive Kitteridge is the main character, and each chapter, it's kind of like a novel in stories. So one chapter will be exclusively about Olive Kitteridge, and then the next chapter will be about the inhabitant of the town. And then Olive Kitteridge will enter in as a kind of secondary character. Maybe she'll just have a single moment where she comes in. But Olive's the main character, and she's this very larger-than-life figure in the town. She's quite brittle and caustic with people, but she's also very witty and like magnetic, and I think like quite a lovable character. And I think what's really amazing about her, or about the way like Strout writes about her, is that particularly in her relationship with her son, you can kind of see all the ways that if you were to meet her, you'd probably find her a bit much. You'd probably find her like a bit,
difficult.
Of course, difficult, exactly. But because Strout like plunges you into Olive's point of view, and the fact that Olive really wants to make a connection with her son and with various other people, and is kind of frustrated even by her own, sort of character behavior. I don't know, it just makes for sort of something like, it's quite a poignant, sad book, but something about that level of sympathy that she gives the characters and all the characters in the book. I don't know, I think that makes me pretty joyful.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think even though there is a lot of sadness in that book, there is a deep joy through there as well. And I actually think both of your choices so far make for really excellent holiday reading. In fact, I think in Olive Kitteridge, there's a wonderful one that takes place, one of the stories takes place during Christmas, and there's this beautiful depiction of the Christmas lights and a sort of I'm going to use the fancy word, this juxtaposition of disappointments in life along with nevertheless the joy, like it's a real portrait of that, I think. So great choice. And I believe you still have another recommendation for us of a book that brings you joy.
Yeah, I do. The last one I've got today is it's another classic, and it's Right Ho Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse. I'm not like a huge P.G. Wodehouse fan. I think some people really love his work and read everything that he has. I've only read a couple, but this book is really, really funny. I think that's the main reason it brings me joy. So if people don't know, the Jeeves series is about a main character called Bertie Wooster, who's kind of a sort of foppish, very posh, kind of idiot, basically. And his manservant Jeeves, who is much more wry and sardonic, but also extremely intelligent and manages to get Bertie out of all sorts of sort of scrapes and issues that he finds himself in. And in this one, they're trying to play matchmaker to an absolutely absurd character with a great name, which is Gussie Finknottle, who's a teacher who's obsessed with newts. And they're trying to set him up with someone, and it all goes horribly awry. And there's stuff involving a chef and a missing bicycle and all this different stuff. So a sort of chaos kind of ensues. So I just really like the main relationship between Bertie and Jeeves. I think it's a kind of imperishable double act. That manages to be both kind of like satirical and make fun of people, but also is kind of essentially like warm-hearted, and I think recognizes that even though Bertie is kind of an overprivileged idiot, he is at heart basically a good person. Mostly it brings me joy just because it's very, very funny.
I love all of those recommendations, Edward. Yeah, I think I might look out for Under Milkwood, because that does sound like exactly the sort of parochial kind of thing that I want to listen to while I'm preparing Christmas dinner or something,
exactly. No, it's perfect for that.
Yeah. I'd never listened to it before, actually, but I always wanted to. Sorry, need to put my hand up again.
Well, it's your turn anyway, Amy, because I'm turning to you to find out what books have brought you joy.
Well, when we suggested this as a topic, I thought, this will be really easy because there's so many books out there that bring people joy. And then I tried to think of some actual examples, and I thought, everything I read or listen to is really depressing. Like there's no joy anywhere. But then, but I think that's kind of in most of the recent things that I've been reading or listening to. I think I had to sort of delve a little bit deeper into my reading history, and I found some examples. But the first example is it kind of so like dark and sometimes depressing that it actually ends up being joyful. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you ever kind of read a book that's like, it's so kind of like macabre that it actually kind of sparks something in you that kind of really enjoys it in just like a joyful way. What I'm talking about,
I think that's just your dark heart, Amy.
Yeah, I'm sensing, because you're both looking a bit blank, and I'm sensing that maybe I am just evil. But I think so. I used to really enjoy the Roald Dahl short stories, which are for adults. A lot of his short stories, they'd often involve like somebody getting revenge on somebody that had been cruel to them, which is often something that happens in his kids' books as well. You know how like in a lot of his children's books, there'd just be like an adult villain that terrorizes the child, like, I don't know, Mrs. Trunchbull or I guess the witches and the witch. And then the main character usually kind of like gets their revenge in quite a satisfying way. I think this is what I mean. I think it's satisfying, and that's what's joyful about it. But in the short stories, there'd usually be somebody that's sort of been wronged somehow by someone else. And I don't know, when they kind of get revenge, it's quite, I don't know, brings me joy. There's a particular short story called The Way Up to Heaven, and I won't tell you what happens in it. And I suppose because it's a short story, you really can't say anything about it at all, because you just end up giving stuff away, because there's like, you know, not a lot of content in there because it's short. But yeah, basically the main character in it, her husband is quite cruel to her, and at the end she gets her own back in a very kind of like, it seems like a bit of a passive way, but actually it's really kind of fitting to how he was cruel to her. And it's just like, yeah, you kind of like really you're just really happy that she kind of sort of stood up for herself in a way, and it's really joyful. So basically what I'm saying is, if someone meets a sticky end in a way that's really satisfying, I'm just really happy about it. I suppose that goes for a lot of books, doesn't it? Like if there's like a horrible character in it, the villain, and they kind of, you know, they're destroyed by the protagonist at the end, it's always quite, you know, joyful, even if it's not supposed to be. I don't know. I think
satisfying was a good word. Yeah,
satisfying. Yeah, rather than pure joy in the traditional
glee.
Sense. Glee, yeah. So the second thing that I thought of is very different. So I've kind of thought of like some non-fiction books that bring joy through knowledge. And the book is Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Pérez. And when I first read it, I found it like really refreshing, and I guess again I'll use that word satisfying, but this is in a different way. It's a non-fiction book about kind of how and why the world has sort of been designed for and by men, and obviously at a disadvantage to women. And she uses lots of examples from different areas like medicine and science and kind of domestic circumstances and office work and technology and all these kind of things. And I think like sometimes before, when I've had discussions about kind of gender equality and stuff, it's quite difficult to pick out reasons why things are still unfair, and it gets a bit frustrating because sometimes, you know, you can't put your argument into words very well. But this book is really good at kind of highlighting everything in a really easy way. So I felt like sometimes I should just get this book and just give it to lots of people that I've had arguments with in the past. And I found that quite like uplifting in a way, because it kind of, I don't know, I suppose
it sounds really validating.
Yeah, validating, because sometimes, when you're trying to, I guess, have conversations with people, and you're trying to argue your point and everything, and sometimes it's just hard to back things up, especially because sometimes with feminism, if your life has been negatively impacted because of your gender, it's sometimes hard to exactly figure out why, because there's lots of little things going on all the time, and you sort of just get used to it. And then you kind of like, when I read this book, I was like, oh yeah, like there's all these different things going on all the time. And because it's just always been part of my life, you just don't really realize it. So in a way, when you first read it or listen to it, it's a bit sort of like validating, because you kind of, it helps you kind of realize why things are the way they are.
It sounds like it's a good way to sort of fill your arsenal, like for those conversations, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm. I suppose the only thing is then whether or not you remember it. I've got a terrible memory. So basically, I just need to carry around with me this book all of the time, just in case I have to get into one of those discussions, and then I can just leaf through it and find an example really quickly. But yeah, there are other books as well, which I enjoyed for the same reason. Like anything by Caitlin, I think she pronounces it Caitlin, actually, Caitlin Moran. And there's a book called The Descent of Man by Grayson Pérez as well. I was also trying to think of just some novels as well that were just kind of innately joyful, like not in a dark way, like my first example. And I did manage to think of a few that I'd read in the past, actually. And most of them were usually about like a flawed protagonist, like flawed in a relatable way that, you know, we can probably all identify with, and like overcoming their adversities, which is usually to do with like a battle within themselves, and they kind of work through that by their relationships with other people, which is always quite heartwarming, I think. So this is a very popular book that everyone's heard of, but I think Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman is a good example of that, and a book that I enjoyed. And The Silver Linings Playbook by Matthew Quick, and Crooked Heart by Lissa Evans is another one like that. And The Midnight Library by Matt Haig is another one that I've read very recently, actually, which I thought was good. And yes, I would say
I've been seeing that talked
joy.
about on Twitter all over the place. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's super popular at the moment. I think it's been sort of borrowed very, very frequently from our library a lot recently. Also, I just want to mention a street cat named Bob, because sometimes it's just nice to read about a cat. A man and his cat, or a cat and his man. The cat is the main character, obviously. But I thought that was nice. I liked that. Any books about animals helping people? So that's what I was going to suggest.
Those are great.
My joyful recommendations. What about you, Jess?
Yeah, well, I had a similar sort of predicament at first, Amy, because like yourself, I realized that most of the books I'd been reading probably didn't necessarily, joyful isn't the word that I would use to describe them, because I've been trying to read the Booker long list. That the goal was to try to read it ahead of the prize announcement, which did not happen because I was trying to use my local library to borrow them all, and basically I've just been on hold. You know, for a long time for several of the titles. Anyway, so while I was waiting for books to be released to me, I mean, I found myself kind of looking around me going, okay, well, what am I going to read in the meantime while I'm waiting for any of these books to become available? And because I went to Ireland not too long ago on a trip to see my in-laws, and we were in the car, and a radio play by Maeve Benchy came on, and we were all laughing in the car to this radio play. And it made me realize I had never actually read any Maeve Benchy, who's like a household name, you know, and I thought it was kind of shocking that I'd never read any of her work before. And Carolyn O'Donoghue, who we had on the podcast the very first episode of this season, she recommended Circle of Friends by Maeve Benchy as like the best book ever. You know, I mean, she gave it such high recommendations. I was like, gosh, I've really got to seek that out. So while I was waiting, I borrowed a couple of Maeve Benchy novels. I borrowed her very first novel, Light a Penny Candle. And I so enjoyed this book. And it was such a departure from the long list books, which are all pretty serious and heavy going. And it's not like there weren't serious matters. It's not like there wasn't seriousness in this book, but it follows the friendship of these two girls, then women, one of whom is English and is sent to the other one's family during the war, like during the Blitz. So as a child, she was sent to live with this other family, and she becomes best friends with the girl that's her own age in this Irish family. And it follows their lives as they grow up and remain friends, and the men that they partner with at various times and how they affect their lives. I will say that, I mean, I read a few Maeve Benchy novels in a row because they were so delightful and I enjoyed just being with the characters so much. But I did note a trend, and that was, if you think that you've found a nice male character, you are probably wrong. Because even the really charming ones turn out to have a pretty negative effect on the main characters' lives. So anyway, I felt at the end of that book that I wished I could just stay with them until their fictional deaths. You know, I mean, I would have just happily, even if nothing else really happened, I just really enjoyed being with these two main characters as they lived their lives. And then I did read Circle of Friends, which has a very similar, like all the things that I loved about Light a Penny Candle are also in Circle of Friends, but it's got probably a more expanded cast of characters set in Ireland. But again, you have these strong female friendships through their lives. Just really fun. Yeah, I just really enjoyed those. And definitely recommend them if you're on a more like serious literary bender and need a break for something that is more about just good company. I really enjoyed those. And Maeve Benchy, I mean, she's just funny and warm and clever. And anyway, that was a delight. And then I'll just mention a couple of books that I ended up reading through work. So one is the book by David Gange. He's a historian and a writer, and he wrote this book called The Frayed Atlantic Edge. And it's so different from what I would normally read. It's nonfiction. He explored the coastlines, the Atlantic coastlines of Britain and Ireland for this book, and he explored by kayak. So he had these amazing encounters with wildlife, which are documented there, and he's got these beautiful photographs of them as well. But he also he pulls in the importance of poetry to history, and it was there was something so wild and joyful about it. Like I almost felt like I could feel the salt spray of the ocean reading it, you know. There was something really joyful about that, and also really joyful about him, like talking with him and the way that he talks about his experience with such enthusiasm. You can see the joy that it brings him. So really do recommend that. And if you like that book, the conversation with him on the podcast as well is great. And finally, I had the opportunity to produce Judith Kerr's book, When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit, which is a children's novel based on her own experience as a refugee when her family had to escape Germany just before Hitler came to power, and they got out in the nick of time. And
yeah, I love that book. That's a great
you?
book. Yeah, because funny enough, I used to listen to it on audiobook as a child. I can't remember which version, but yeah, I seem to remember. I don't know if I'm pretty sure it's this book. But at one point, do the children drink a bit of wine in it? I can't remember. I think because they're in Paris or something like that, and
yes.
they give them a bit of wine, and it shocked me as a kid. And
yes,
and there's so much sort of they give them like cheese and wine, like sort of French children are. And I don't know. I remember being like so sort of scandalized, but also just kind of like it sounding so good, to have some.
Yeah,
so that's what I remember.
Yeah, I do remember. That's a good memory. I am suddenly recalling that bit, and it was very exciting because the children, I think their parents were going to put them to bed as normal. And then the French family that they were friends with were like, oh, no. Tonight the children stay up and tonight they drink wine and
Yeah.
Jeeves and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about that book that even though it's taking place under really pretty horrific circumstances, it's still a book of adventure. And there's this wonderful humor that the stories are told with, and obviously the sense of innocence, because it is from the child Anna's perspective, and all their little all their achievements. Like I felt like cheering for them, you know? I mean, it was so hard for them to go to a French school, not having ever studied French before, and suddenly, you know, just from scratch, just learn a new language and try to do well in school in that language. And, you know, you can see in the story as well how much work the parents are doing to try to keep this from being traumatic for the children, you know?
Yeah.
And what a heavy burden that must have been on the parents, who were constantly having to make new plans as the situation changed. I think it's a wonderful book. And actually I laughed out loud at parts. It really was, the funny parts are very funny, and you can see it play out. Yeah. Anyway, I really loved producing that book. So anyway, those are the books that have brought me joy in the past few months. You're listening to the Listening Books podcast. Did you know that Listening Books now makes it easy to buy someone a gift membership? If someone on your list has difficulty reading traditional print, you could give them access to books that bring them joy all year long through our audiobook lending service. Listening Books is a UK charity, so the person you're buying for must live in the UK and have an illness, disability, learning difficulty, or mental health condition that makes it difficult to read the printed word. You can find out more at www.listening-books.org.uk/gift-membership. I'll put a link in the show notes. Now, are you ready for the game? Let's play. Now, Edward, I believe this is going to be a big moment for you, because you're about to be initiated into the Christmas literary quiz.
Oh dear.
I hope you're suitably impressed.
I'm ready. Plug me in. I'm good to go.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Now, I didn't ask you to bring any noisemakers. I think last year we ended up having 2 sets of bells, so it didn't really do that much to distinguish.
No.
So what I was thinking was, in place of a buzzer, Edward, might we get a jolly ho 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 from you when you have the answer? Will you be able to do that for us?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Try and stop me.
Can we hear a sample now, just so we're prepared?
Ho, ho, ho. You want it jollier? Was that not jolly enough?
That was... Can you go jollier?
It's getting there. It sounds a bit
maybe.
suspicious. Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah.
Just wait. Now, Amy, for you, so ho, ho, ho is already taken, I'm afraid.
Okay.
But I thought, actually, a sinister little he from you might be appropriate.
Okay. Is that going to be different enough from ho, ho, ho? I suppose the way that I perform it is key.
The way you perform, yes, yeah.
It's pretty good.
Like a witch. That's kind of more fitting for Halloween.
It also sounded quite jolly as well.
Yeah,
it did. It sounded sort of like the glee that we were talking about when you see
like
justice being done.
Malevolent joy.
Exactly. It's that. Yeah, malevolent joy. That's what I was going for, obviously.
Malevolent joy. That's what we're going for. Yeah. Okay. So for our quiz today, which I know you're both very excited about and maybe even trepidatious about, I have scoured, Goodreads, and even Amazon reviews to find 1-star reviews of famous classic Christmas books or stories.
Okay.
And your job is to guess quicker than the other person which book I'm talking about or which story I'm talking about.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Yes.
So, first 1-star review. There was no depth. Just a stupid kid who gets on a train with a stranger. There's a good message for kids.
Ho, ho, ho.
Yes, Edward.
Polar Express.
Yes, the Polar Express.
I was
Haha,
trying
well
to think
done.
of that. I was picturing the film with the weird animation, but I couldn't think of what that was called. But
I
didn't even-
paused and almost said Strangers on a Train by accident, which is quite different.
that classic Christmas story.
Christmas story.
Christmas romp.
Amazing. Okay, 1 point to Edward then. All right, number 2. This 1-star review starts with a quote. A children's story that can only be enjoyed by children is not a good children's story in the slightest. Clearly, the author should have practiced what they preached. On the dedication page, the author said he wrote this story for his goddaughter, Lucy. And that's exactly how it reads, like a word-for-word transcription of a never-ending bedtime story.
Hee.
Yes, Amy?
Is it one like a Narnia book?
Possibly.
The Lion, the Witch, and the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yes! Well done, Amy.
That was quite intense for me because I didn't hear what there was a weird internet interference crackle when you said whether I got it right or not. So I was like, oh, "Did I?" But now I've deduced that I did.
You did.
I have never actually. I've seen some of the films. I've never actually read them, but I know one of the characters is called Lucy, isn't she? So
That's
I
right.
thought,
Yeah. She's the one
Cool.
she's the one who discovers Narnia through the wardrobe. And I have to say, I've got a little bit of a beef with publishers who publish the series now in chronological order of the story instead of the order in which they were published. Because I really believe quite strongly that Lucy is the way that we're meant to encounter Narnia for the first time. And instead they always publish The Magician's Nephew as first, which is more like a prequel, you know, like that was initially published later. It goes later in the series, and it's interesting as this is how it began. But for me, it doesn't work well as the
first one,
as your first encounter with Narnia. I think that should be with Lucy through the wardrobe. Are we ready for number 3? I think we're ready. So far, we're tied. So number 3, complete letdown. The Muppets were never even mentioned in the book.
Hee.
Yes, Amy?
Oh, Edward thought he was going to get in there because of the delay, but no, I just done it. Christmas Carol.
That's it. Well done.
I
2
wrote
points
that
to
review.
Amy.
Muppets is the best version.
It is the best version.
Don't contact me.
Well done. Okay, number 4. Very weird book. Strange rhyming and nonsense words. The people are drawn like some kind of aliens. And this...
Oh, he.
Yes, Amy?
The Grinch that stole Christmas, or whatever the full title is.
It's very... Well, I do need the full title, I'm afraid.
The Grinch that stole Christmas.
You're very close.
And who is
Edward,
the
do you
author?
know-
I can't remember.
Well, let me read the rest of the review and you'll probably remember the author.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And this blank character, I don't know if it's a talking animal or if he's also an alien. Apparently, the author is not an actual MD or PhD.
Oh, yeah. Dr. Seuss.
Yes.
Seuss.
Yes. Can we get the actual title of the book?
This is as near as I'm
either
going to
of
get.
Okay. I think the point has to go to Amy.
So I'm not sure. I'm afraid.
The title of the book is How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And it's funny that review was like, what is the Grinch? Because I believe we've had this conversation before.
Yeah, we did.
About
like last Christmas.
What is the Grinch?
Yeah, didn't we decide it was like a cat, like a weird green cat or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That was one of the ideas floated anyway.
Would have been better had Dr. Seuss had a PhD.
Yeah, exactly. The last question is going to be worth 2 points. So we will either tie or Amy will run away with it. Or should I make it 3 points so that either one of you can still win?
Well, of course you should make it 3.
now.
Okay. Okay. Last question is worth 3 points.
Okay, fine.
So this is it's all down to this question. In this charming tale, a young boy is abducted in the night by his jolly imaginary friend who melts in the end.
He.
Yes, Amy?
The snowman.
Yes, it is the snowman. Do you remember the author by any chance?
Raymond Briggs.
That's it. Well done,
Yeah.
Amy. You have run away with this entirely.
Yeah,
Thank
congratulations.
you.
Yeah, yeah. Well done.
No.
Aw. Ho 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 became no.
Yeah. What do I win? Is there a prize?
Oh well, you won.
That's the tone of someone that's trying to think of it now.
Yes.
What's the prize?
You won
win the
respect
title
from your
of-
colleagues.
Okay.
That's it, yeah. You've won the respect of your colleagues. That's it.
Something I've never
and-
had, so it's good.
And the title of Christmas Quiz Champion 2021.
Yay.
Oh, that's good. That really stings. That really stings.
Oh, well done, both.
Thanks for that. That was fun.
Thanks so much to Edward and Amy for their recommendations and good-natured competitiveness. And thank you, as always, for listening. From all of us at Listening Books, we wish you a fabulous festive season, full of books that bring you joy. The Listening Books podcast is produced by Listening Books, a UK charity that provides an audiobook lending service for over 115,000 members who find that an illness, mental health, physical or learning disability affects their ability to read the printed word or hold a book. It's simple to join. For more information, head to our website www.listening-books.org.uk.